Live. Hello, book club members, students, and participants. Today, we have a famous educationist and science popularizer among us. I myself have used his information and entertainment-laced videos multiple times as class material. We will learn from him how he has been building cool stuff online. COVID-19 presented several problems, and our guest with his team tackled them with their innovative solutions. And we will also learn from him how his skills have enabled him and those who associate with him make some money in the process. So the guest we have invited in our book club is Glenn Wolkenfeld. He is commonly known as Mr. W, which has a friendly tone just like his personality. He is the creator of learnbiology.com. That is biology.com and the Biomania apbio app. He is the CEO of sciencemusicvideos. He is an AP biology teacher at Berkeley High School. And he deserves it. He won the California's 2020 Outstanding Biology Teacher of the Year Award. A little bit introduction about learnbiology.com. Learn-biology.com provides students with interactive tutorials that use quizzes and flashcards to help them learn biology. With learnbiology.com, the students can ace their tests, their semester finals, and the AP Bio exam. Thanks for joining us, Mr. W. So we are going to start with the question. The first question that our students had for you is, what made you write those songs? And what was the thought process going on? What was the stimulation behind it? And your background in poetry and music.
Okay. Thank you, first of all, for that really beautiful, comprehensive introduction. I really appreciate it. So I've been a teacher for a long time, since I was about 27 years old. And I've been playing guitar since I've been about 14 years old. And my first teaching job was at a school for kids with disciplinary problems who had all been asked to leave their high school for either academic or disciplinary reasons. And it was a very small school, and it had a beautiful tradition, which is every morning, teachers like me who played guitar would start with a song circle. And in those days, we would sing songs by folks who maybe you know, I'm sure you do, like the Beatles or Bob Dylan or things like that. And one thing that I noticed was that students really paid a lot of attention and really joined in with a lot of happiness during those song circles, much more so than when I was teaching about the parts of cells or about ecological relationships or about chemical bonding or something like that. So the first songs that I wrote when I was very young, and it was literally within a day or two of me teaching. It was mostly inspiration, but what I found myself writing down were the lyrics to a song about food chains. And then I taught that to my students, and that's my food chain song. That is one of the few songs that I've ever written that doesn't have an original tune to it. I used the tune from a popular television show at the day that all my students knew. But then I just started writing more songs, and it sort of became a tradition throughout my teaching career that I'd have a couple of songs, and all the while, whenever I had the opportunity, I'd bring my guitar into class and I'd have my students sing the songs. And it was always a really wonderful moment, because it's not something that typically happens in a science class where your science teacher brings in their guitar and has you not only listen to a song, but actually sing it. And the songs are very catchy. You might have you might have heard my cell song if you were looking at my YouTube channel. It goes, I went into a cell to get out of the rain. There was the gatekeeper, the cell membrane. And it goes on and rhymes all the different parts of the cells. And, you know, kids loved it. And I kept on doing that, even as I left that first school and went to schools that had a little bit more of a standard situation where it was just, you know, regular kids learning biology. So that was a very, very long time ago because, you know, you can see by my beard, I've got a couple of years on me. I taught through the 1990s, and during the 1990s, it was difficult to do video. You know, you had to have a camera and special editing equipment and stuff like that. So I always had a plan of somehow distributing these songs on video. I even took a couple of video classes, but distribution was very, very hard. And then along came 2007, and this thing called YouTube was born. And so I just went ahead and took some of my songs and started putting them on YouTube. And I know that there was a question that people had about, like, what was my technology? The first technology was literally recording myself through the camera on my computer, not too much different than the one I'm using now. And then dropping in images from a lesson that I had done about the parts of cells, for example, and cutting back and forth between me singing and the tune. And I had bought a good microphone, so my sound quality was pretty good. And I played guitar accompanying myself. And I uploaded it to YouTube, set up a YouTube channel, and wow, people started watching it. And that was an amazing, amazing thing. And then I wrote a couple of more songs. And then I took a little bit of a turn. I've always really liked hip hop and rap music. You know, here I am, sort of a white middle-class person. It's not exactly my culture, but nevertheless, it's something that I've really, really appreciated and I've really respected. And I've respected how, especially in rap, there's very dense lyrics and you can really tell a good story. So I started to write some rap songs. They weren't very good. And so I started to look for a producer, someone who could really teach me the art of it. And so I found one. He happened to be my son's piano teacher, and he's a great musician. His name is Max Cowan. He plays a lot of really great music. He has a band that's called Ada Kid, and it's a lot of funk is really his main thing. He's a great piano player. But anyhow, he started producing me, and then I started producing some raps, and I did one about DNA, and then I did one about glycolysis, and those wound up being super popular. And, you know, the more popular they were, the more I was motivated to do it. So that's basically the story about how it started. First, it was really inspiration, and that was early on in my teaching career. And then I sort of started to pursue it with a little bit more intention and started to think about how I could cover more and more of the curriculum. And I think I have about 30 songs at this point. And I haven't covered the curriculum by any means, but a lot of the topics that we learn about in an introductory biology course are covered there. So that's how the whole thing started.
Excellent. And I can relate to it that you had students that had disciplinary problems, and then that made you go through the entire process of presenting your material in a music form. So I teach a class of more than 100 students.
Wow.
So more than 100 students. So it is very difficult to keep their attention to the class material. So your songs, they help me in conveying the message, what is in the subject. So thank you so much. So it is also relevant to me as well. So my next question is, which is related to it, how do you see in these days, how do you see the value of visual and auditory presentation? Visual and auditory presentation, just like bringing guitar. A lot of schools and colleges or even universities might not allow it. So how do you see the future of it? Do you see some three-dimensional avatar that appears in the class and teaches the students? Just like in the COVID situation, we had online classes. So instead of you in your Zoom, there is a meeting, virtual meeting, where your avatars are present. So do you get my point?
I
Where
do.
you
I'm a
see the
little
future?
curious about, you said that the university might not allow the actual televised presence of the professor or the teacher. That was confusing to me.
Yeah, I was talking about physically bringing guitar into the class.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, I've taught mostly on the West Coast of the United States, in Oregon and in California. And, in none of those situations, especially at the high school level, I'm not sure what it would be like at a university level, but I think that, there's always interesting teachers who are good teachers are always doing, like, for example, presentations and demonstrations and things like that. And some of those demonstrations can really be quite elaborate. So I would hope that, like, wanting to get your students to sing a song wouldn't be something that would be prohibited. The thing about the avatar is that one thing that I think is very, very important is that teachers bring the joy that they feel about science to the classroom in a very, very personal way. One thing that I think makes me an effective teacher is the fact that I really love biology. I find it fascinating. I've been trying to figure out how to teach the complex processes involved in, for example, the immune system. Think about how intricate that process is. And so to take that and to render it into a form where, for me, a 17-year-old can really understand that very well and can actually talk about it with fluency. That takes a lot of art, and I love that. I mean, the fact that is so challenging to do, and I think my love involves several levels. One is that I love the content, the immune system itself, for example, photosynthesis, glycolysis, all of those are such beautiful, intricate reactions, and sort of, I love the complexity of that. And then I also really love the challenge of teaching that. Like, how do you get your understanding of that to be picked up by something else? So I think I would actually pass on the avatar if I could personally be either directly in the room with students or even have a virtual presence. Last year, on account of COVID, I had to teach my class completely virtually. Our school district, we didn't do any in-face teaching until the very end of the year, when I was able to run a few labs. But I feel like, despite the fact that here we were, and it was really this context, it was me on the screen, I think I was still able to communicate the fact that, wow, biology is so cool. You think about 4 billion years of evolution to produce these systems. And then you just sort of think about the size of the Earth and the intricacy of the planetary systems that sustain life. It's all wonderful stuff. So I really try and communicate that, in my lessons when I'm teaching with my students. And of course, I try and do it with the videos that I make. I hope I even try and do it in my website, learn-biology.com, which you mentioned at the top of the show. So,
Alamsha, please go ahead.
This method of teaching through songs and all of that, like, I've heard a few, DNA, fantastic, and my personal favorite, mitosis, chromosomal right, So when you sing songs in the class and teaching that way, so why do you think it's so effective? Why students get so excited and they want to learn more about it? So what's the reason behind it?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. First of all, one of my mantras as a teacher is just to make learning interactive, to get students to not just passively take in the information, but to do something. And the main thing that I have my students do is I teach in a way where I constantly am pausing in my own instruction and having having my students turn to one another and explain what we're learning about. So like, for example, in terms of mitosis, I'd have a series of diagrams and I'd say, okay, person on the left, explain to the person on the right, what's happening during interphase, what's happening during prophase, what's the relationship of the daughter cells to the parent cell that started the process. So music is just another way of doing that. So music is yet another way of engaging and engaging a very different part of the brain. So like, for example, with mitosis, there's all my songs are intensely rhymed. So the rhyme is another thing that helps memory. And, if you can get a student to actually sing a song to themselves, that can be incredibly effective. And I've had a couple of great experiences where a couple of years ago on the AP exam, one of the questions was about the electron transport chain. And my students came back to me and they just said, hey, Mr. W, I was just able to sing the chorus to that song. And that guided me through the entire essay, because the chorus is, the mitochondrial electron transport chain uses electron energy for pumping protons from the mitochondrial matrix to the intermembrane space. So right there, the sort of explaining about what the electron transport chain was doing, how there was a creation of a proton gradient. And I think it was a lot easier for my students and hopefully hundreds of other students around the world to remember on account of the fact that there was rhyme. So, anything that helps memory is really, really good. And, I know that one thing that you asked me about, Professor, was to talk about some fiction books. I'll tell you about a non-fiction book. There's a book called Make It Stick. And it's very important that you remember, make it stick, not made to stick. Made to Stick is a book about advertising, which is also very good. But this is different. This is all about learning. And, learning is difficult and getting complex ideas to stick in one's head is difficult. And the funny thing is that with all of the research that we've done on cognitive science, one of the most effective ways to learn something is just memory and repetition. So like, for example, flashcards. Flashcards are a fantastic way to embed something into memory. So music helps memory. I have flashcards on my Learn-Biology website, again, helping memory. It's all about making the learning active, making students actually explain the stuff themselves, because, passive learning, easy to forget. When you do it, it's much, much better. So I think I might have gone a little bit on a tangent in response to your question. I hope I got the answer.
No, you were right on track. And another question which is related to your current description is that how do you see the role of social media in students' attention span? You bring in music, that's fine. But if you go deeper into the context, and you have been successful in doing this with the electron transport chain, TCA cycle, glycolysis, and 30 songs that you mentioned. But overall, since science is broader than biology, it has physics in it, it has chemistry and other subjects in it. So what has happened to the attention span of our generation, including my generation and maybe including your generation? What is the role of social media? And on one hand, it has made you popular as well, right? But on the other hand, it has played havoc with the attention span of people. So your comments on that?
Outside of YouTube, I haven't really deployed a lot of social media. A lot of what I've done on the internet has all been, Web 1.0, which is about me making a website that teachers and students can use to learn biology. I haven't really, outside of YouTube, I haven't really done that much social media. And like, if you look for me on Instagram, there's nothing. And, I don't tweet and all of those things that maybe I should do, I'm not doing. Because really what I get a lot of joy from is developing my website, which has been my big project lately. I've recently sort of created a complete AP biology website. And now what I'm trying to do is adjust it so it's appropriate for high school students. By the way, the AP biology student is also great for university students. If your students are pharmacology students, they're probably a little bit beyond what my website offers. But eventually we'd like to put an environmental science curriculum. And actually, one thing that I am interested in doing, I just need the time to do it, is to do an anatomy and physiology curriculum. But you were asking me about social media and about students' attention spans. I feel like every educator today is sort of fighting a war with cell phones. And it's very, very difficult to get students, basically, I have to have classroom rules that, cell phones need to be away. And there are teachers at my school who actually collect cell phones. They put them in a little cell phone caddy that's at the front of the room. And I think that of course wouldn't be appropriate with your students who are super advanced, but you can get away with setting rules like that at the high school level. It's difficult, but I also know that, like, when I was in high school, I was incredibly distracted by things too. But so it's a little hard for me to judge. I don't think that I'm necessarily was a better or more focused student than my students are now. But I do understand the distraction that cell phones cause, and I do believe that we live in a distracted age. But at the same time, I look at the actual achievement of my students and the amount of biology that they're capable of learning. I don't feel like they've been ruined by cell phones or by digital media. And of course, digital media in and of itself has been a great thing for me, because, like, here I am talking to you in Pakistan. So I can't really complain about it too much. And not only that, it would also be disingenuous for me to complain about, like, for example, cell phones, because I've created an app that students can use to learn more biology. So I'm trying to leverage the fact that we have these incredible tools to do interactive learning. And the fact is that, I've been teaching since 1987. And I know that's before all of your students were born. And it might be, Professor, before you were born. It's totally possible. But I've been writing computer programs, not really complicated computer programs, but I've been a big believer in the use of computers in education for my entire career. Like, I've never not taught with a computer, and not only to create curriculum myself, but also to deliver instruction to students. So there was, believe it or not, a moment when I was delivering instruction to students by handing them floppy disks and having them put the floppy disks into their computer. And I think that probably most of your students here are so young they barely remember what a floppy disk is. But I was doing this before there was internet. So anyhow, phones are complicated. They've definitely are changing people's ability to pay attention. But I do find that my students are capable of tremendous achievements, and I don't think they've been ruined by phones or anything like that. So that's kind of where I wind up. I mean, look, I'm constantly checking my email myself, so I have my own brand of addiction to social media. So there we go.
So we have Sayyida Fatma from Dow University of Health Sciences.
Okay.
She has a question and she wants to ask you that. Sayyida Fatma, please go ahead, unmute yourself and you can ask the question.
Okay, so my question from Mr. W was that as he has discussed his whole journey, so what do you think about the life chemistry, sir?
Do you mean biochemistry? I'm not sure what life chemistry is. We don't use that term in.
Like you share your all journey, right? So it's too amazing and it was too struggling. So what do you think about life chemistry?
Okay, so let me rephrase it.
Okay.
You mentioned that you mentioned that you started playing guitar when you were 14 years of age. So what came first? Was it the love of music that was at the foundational level, and then biology was added to it? Or was it biology from the start that motivated you to use your music towards education? and your overall point of view about biochemistry. What makes it so interesting if you compare it with other subjects? So you are a biology teacher, why not other subjects? So what made it stick? Just like the book that you
I
mentioned.
really appreciate your question. And I think I have a very interesting perspective on that. When I was in college, I graduated from college in 1983. I know that's a very long time ago. I was not a science major. I studied sociology at a wonderful university called Brandeis University. It's in the Boston area where there are many wonderful colleges in the United States. It's a great place to go to college. And I was interested in it because of the ideas. After I graduated from college, I read very widely. You know, I wasn't on a very strong career path right after I graduated from college, and I was privileged enough to travel a little bit. And I also read very widely. And one of the things I read was a book by the evolutionary biologist, Richard Dawkins. It's called The Selfish Gene, and it's one of his earlier works. And what Professor Dawkins was trying to do is he was trying to understand, even though it's called the selfish gene, he was trying to explain the evolutionary basis of altruism. And altruism is when one organism actually acts in a selfless way to promote the survival of others. And the book isn't necessarily full of original work. Dawkins is really a brilliant, he's a brilliant explainer. Anyhow, I found that book so interesting, so mind-blowingly engaging, that I remember the moment when I was on a beach in Oregon, where I was living at the time, and I said to myself, I am going to be a teacher and I'm going to teach biology so that I can share these ideas. So, I mean, I was already playing guitar and I already loved the Beatles and stuff like that, but I didn't really have an intellectual path until I was turned on to evolutionary biology by Professor Richard Dawkins. And he has written just one wonderful book after the next, though I feel like some of his most recent stuff has become a little problematic. But if you stick to his biology work, they are fantastic. So like, for example, a book called The Blind Watchmaker, which is all about natural selection. He has a book called The Ancestor's Tale, which is an unbelievable book, because what he does is he talks about evolutionary history not going forward, because when you go forward, it makes it look as if like human beings are the inevitable outcome of evolution. And of course, that isn't the case. You know, the story of evolution is a story of contingency and a story of things that happen that led our group of primates to wind up being the, you know, the dominant animal on Earth. But so he sort of says, let's not tell that story. Let's start with where we are now and go backwards. And he goes backwards right to the origin of life. And it is such a magnificent journey. I can't recommend that strongly enough. So The Ancestor's Tale by Richard Dawkins, fantastic stuff. So anyhow, that was sort of the thing that really turned me on intellectually. And I have to say, so I was about 25 years old when that happened. I was 27 when I was first in front of a classroom. I feel like I've been learning the biology and learning education ever since. And, you know, and the music winds up getting integrated into that as well. So, I'm a very lucky person to have a bunch of different things that I'm passionate about to be guiding, you know, my life's journey. So thank you very, very much for that question. I hope I answered it in a satisfying way.
Yes, indeed. About a month or two ago, I recommended Magic of Reality by Richard Dawkins to my class. They had their break, so I recommended that. And the audiobook is especially amazing. That is narrated by him and his ex-wife. So audiobook is really, really amazing.
They've done a recent version, a re-release of The Selfish Gene on audiobook that is also narrated by Dawkins. I didn't know, her name is Layla Ward, I think, right? That's his, it must be his ex-wife now. Yes.
Yeah. So she was an actress, so that is why she has the proper narration style. So it is
Good.
actually a performance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Alamsha, please go ahead with your question.
So I wanted to know, when you create these songs, so the rhythm comes first, or you write the lyrics first, and then you come up with a catchy rhythm. Which thing comes first?
Yeah. So a lot of these songs that I've done in recent years have actually been created in collaboration with my music producer. His name is Max Cowan. So in general, I'm really good at lyrics. Like that's if I have a gift in this thing, it's really about the lyrics. So what I will do is I'll have a song that has a kind of tune that I like, and thinking of that song, I'll write the lyrics. And then I'll take those lyrics to Max and I'll say, hey, Max, what can we do with this? Because what we've wanted to do is have original music, because that's a sort of an important thing to do if you want to have a successful YouTube channel. You want your music to not be covers. I mean, I could just write songs to Taylor Swift and stuff like that, because I love her and her music is fantastic. But I couldn't really make any money doing that also, and it just wouldn't be nearly as fun. So I would say that like the music inspires the lyrics, and then I take the lyrics to Max, and we usually have a discussion like, okay, like what would be a great hook for the song, and we'll think of it. So like, and some of those have just been fantastic. So like my glycolysis song, which winds up being a joke, glycolysis, come on sugar for the breakdown, So there's all these puns and double entendres that are involved in that. So that's really, really fun stuff to be able to do that in collaboration with someone. And another way in which I count myself as being really lucky is I have a couple of really great collaborations. And one is with Max, my music producer, and the other is the guy who does the programming on my website, because the programming on the website goes way, way beyond what I can do. So I work with a guy named Dan Kirshner, who's a brilliant programmer who has created really great tools for me to create interactive media and also make the website work.
Okay, so I wanted to ask one more thing. When out of all the songs that you created, which topic was the most difficult, or which topic took the most time to put into a song?
That's such an interesting question. A lot of the songs I get pretty inspired, and they're not necessarily that hard, though I did have one really great experience, which is for a long time I had wanted to write the song that I mentioned before about the electron transport chain. And I had the situation where my daughter was visiting some colleges that she was interested in. My daughter's 25 years old, so this was about 9 years ago, and she and my wife flew across the country. We're in California. She wanted to visit some some colleges that are on the East Coast. So I dropped them off at the airport and I drove to the beach. The beach is not too far from where I live. It's the coast of California. It's incredibly gorgeous. And I went there, I walked on the beach, and then I went for breakfast, and I took out my notebook, and that electron transport chain just burst out of me. It was fantastic. And, this is an interesting thing about creativity too. I let the song come out in an imperfect way. Like I didn't have all the rhymes right, and I didn't have all the meter right, but I just knew that I was being inspired at that moment, and I needed to let that inspiration flow through me. And then later, you go through the very, very difficult process, if you're a songwriter, of working through every lyric and getting the word to be exactly right. And so, there's inspiration, and then there's the hard work of making a song really, really good, making the lyrics really, really tight. So that's the story. I'm trying to think of like other songs that were really difficult. The difficult ones I think I haven't written yet is really the ones that I wrote were the ones that came to me pretty easily. So here I am with my 30, 40 songs. So there you go.
Okay, Sundus is also from Dow University of Health Sciences. Sundus, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, sir. So my
Wow.
question is that for creators, like there is a time when they feel demotivated. So, have you ever feel demotivated, like not to post or not to share your music?
I heard part of your question, and I think your question was also in the chat. Did you also ask me the question about was this the question about what motivates me? Because sometimes teachers themselves
yes.
get tired. Is that
yes? Yeah. It's so her question is related to something like writer's block. So if you get demotivated, so there must be phases when you get demotivated. So what brings you back? So Sundas, am I right? Is this your question?
Yes, sir. Exactly.
okay? Yeah, writer's block has not been a big problem for me, and I think that's just because well, there's two things. One is I'm actually not, I produced the last song that I produced was about a year ago, actually. So I haven't been in a very musical moment in terms of my own creativity. And that's because most of my focus has actually been on developing my website and trying to create a really robust interactive experience on my website. I do a couple of things. Like one thing is I tend to write in a journal every single day. And there is a book by an author. Her name is Julia Cameron. And she wrote a book called The Artist's Way. I'll put the name in the chat. Julia, oops, misspelled that again. Okay, got it there. Julia Cameron. So the book is called The Artist's Way. And she wrote a book that was sort of explicitly about avoiding writer's block. And her idea was that like every morning you get up and you write at least a page and you just let whatever is in your head come out. And sort of once you've done that, you've kind of loosened the gears so that more things can come out. But it's funny, like I'm not a novelist. I'm not like trying to tell a great story. So I never get stuck with that. I'm trying to explain things that are pretty, that like they're telling me what I need to explain. So like, for example, I'm working on explaining photosynthesis. So, okay, I gotta explain about what light is, and I have to explain about the light reactions. I have to explain about the Kelvin cycle. So it's almost like because I'm a nonfiction writer, the issues that I think people who are creative in other ways, like they're telling stories, I have not really experienced that so much. And, again, right now I'm not in the very musical phase, but I'm okay with that because I've got these other projects that are so intense or so engaging and so fun, actually. So, and I'm working on other stuff musically. I told you that I've been playing guitar since I've been about 14. I peaked as a guitarist maybe when I was 18. And like I can play chords okay, but I'm not really very good. And I've never been able to play lead and I've never been able to improvise. So right now I've been taking a pretty deep dive into guitar and I've been learning how to play blues and fingerstyle blues, and I'm really bad at it right now, but I'm very hopeful about getting better at it. So anyhow, my music, my sort of musical needs have been met by my explorations on the guitar, and I think it's going to come back. Like I think you can expect to hear some blues songs, blues biology from me within a year or two. It'll be up there. So.
Excellent. So you mentioned you being a non-fiction writer. So for the past 5 years, I have been a scientific writer for Novus Biologicals. That is a US-based company, but that's a basically multinational company. So I can really relate to it. Once you are into non-fiction writing, sometimes, and as far as I am concerned, I have very much difficulty in describing myself in fiction. So fiction is not my genre where I can express myself. So it is always non-fiction. It has always been non-fiction. So we have a question from Arij. So unfortunately, she cannot be on video. So her question is like this, that I'm going to read her question. She is a student of a second year student of Form D at Salim Habib University. Her question is, visual musical learning, while great for self-study, is sometimes not ideal for activities that require interaction with groups of people. Musical videos are limited to scenarios they can imagine, and real events may prove to be different from the learner's expectation. Do you think this type of learning is limiting students, especially introverted students, when they reach in their practical life? So in other words, she wants to know the limitations of musical videos. And secondly, you mentioned that in your class, you made your entire class sing along. So there may be introverted personalities who may not feel comfortable in this way of pedagogy. So I think this is what she wants to say. So your comments on this.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think that that's a great question. I think that teachers need to do many things in the classroom and teach in many different ways so that they can meet the needs of different learners. So like, for example, if music was all that I did, I don't think that would be effective because the type of music itself might not be to everybody's taste, and that would be a turnoff to some of the learners. So if I just did music, that wouldn't be good. And so one thing that I try and do is I try and really do a lot of different things in the classroom. So I have a website, which is extremely interactive, but I also do a lot of social learning. So like, for example, I'll have my students in groups and they'll be talking through things. And of course, you know, as a science teacher, I'll do labs. So students will have some hands-on experience. And in fact, what's become very, very popular in the United States is to have students doing their own investigations. So like, for example, not only will I do labs, but sometimes what I'll do is I'll teach students, okay, we're going to use a device to measure the rates of respiration in respiring organisms like peas. And, you know, basically it's a very simple thing. It's called a respirometer. I actually have a video about it, but, you know, you can actually see oxygen getting consumed over time. So what I'll do is I'll do a lab where I'll teach students the basic method, and then I'll have them design an experiment where they might be comparing. It's very good for comparing like tiny organisms or seeds or something like that. So they might compare peas to corn or something like that, or lentils, or else they might try and see like whether the size of a seed has a big influence on its respiration rate, and then they're looking at surface area to volume ratios. But the main thing that I'm saying is that I agree to just do music would be a very, very limited way of approaching the curriculum. So it's very important that teachers do many things. But I do want to say one thing. I think sometimes students are shy, and you really do need to provide room when you're singing in class for students to do what they, you know, to feel comfortable. But one of the best things that I've done has been with some of my easier songs. I'll teach the song, and then I'll say, you know, I have sometimes 30 students, which is much less than you, Professor, but you know, 30 students in the classroom, and I'll say, okay, you two, you'll do the first verse, and then the next two, you'll do the second verse, and then the next two, you'll do the third verse. And some of my songs, I have karaoke versions of them. And so I'll play the karaoke version, and I'll have students either sing it or rap it. And, you know, they don't do it very well, but they have a great time doing it. And there's a lot of laughter and there's a lot of joy in the classroom. But at the same time, if somebody said, oh no, Mr. W, I can't do this, I hate singing, I of course would be okay with that, you know. But balancing interactivity and balancing joy and also respecting individuals' autonomy is very, very important. So that's how I try and balance all of those things.
Okay, Alamsha, please go ahead with your questions.
So, Mr. W, what do you think are the advantages of reading fiction for a student with a background of science? So what are the advantages? What do you think about that?
Well, you know, I grew up personally reading science fiction. And I think that the line from science fiction that I read as a kid to what I experience now, I think that you can make that connection. And that was some classic science fiction like Isaac Asimov and the Foundation series, or Dune by Frank Herbert, which I've read many times, or recently Andy Weir wrote this book, The Martian, which was made into a very popular movie with Matt Damon, and I love that book. In fact, Professor Jamshed mentioned audiobooks. I listen to The Martian to put myself to sleep at night if I wake up in the middle of the night and I have trouble falling back to sleep, I'll put on The Martian. I probably listened to it 50 times. But anyhow, I think that fiction is super valuable in general. Literature is really great. Like I mentioned, I was a sociology major in college, so I really believe in the humanities. But I can't actually say that I'm super well read. Like my friends in general have read many more novels than I've read. But fiction is great. Science fiction can be a great portal to getting people interested in science, and can also be a way to really explore a lot of the deep ideas in science. So yeah, I think that's what I would say about that.
Okay, so you must have heard about Eminem. He's an exceptional rapper and also known for his diss tracks. So I was going through, one of your videos, and I saw this comment and quote, it was top 10 artists Eminem cannot diss. So what would you like to say about that?
Oh, Eminem is look, some of Eminem's lyrics are quite, he has sexist lyrics, and there's a bunch of problems with Eminem, but he's quite a brilliant rapper. And I think people are just goofing around. They're like, here's a science teacher who's put together a pretty good rap, and they're saying Eminem can't top this. And usually, I have nothing but respect for the artistry of the real rappers who are out there. So yeah, they're amazing, and it's a real honor to even be compared. But I know that I'm not in that league. I'm doing a different thing. I'm doing science rap, and hopefully I'm pretty good. But there's also great people, and there's I'm trying to remember. There's one guy who does. I think he has a YouTube channel. It's called Acapella Science, and there's fabulous music. It's not original generally. I think he's using other people's tunes, but he's a great singer. So anyhow, that's another YouTube channel that you might look to if you like other people who are doing science.
Okay, the habit that you mentioned, that you sleep in this way, I share this habit for the past 2 to 3 years. I do like that. I wear my headphones. I have always difficulty in falling asleep. So I start some of the non-fictions and fictions. But what I found is following fiction is very difficult once you have headphones, because in fiction you need to imagine a lot of stuff, and the crux of the matter comes after 30 minutes or so. So in sleeping mode, you may not be able to imagine this kind of stuff. So for sleeping, I generally recommend non-fictions. So what do you suggest about that?
So, it's interesting. One of my favorite books ever, it's called, I'll put it in the chat. It's called The Big Picture, and it's by Sean Carroll. And I think I spelled that right. So Sean Carroll is a physicist at Caltech. And The Big Picture is an amazing book because as a physicist, he looks a lot at biology, and it's not just biology. He talks about the standard model of like quantum mechanics and really sort of like how the universe works. But then he takes this thinking about how the universe works and he applies it to things like the origin of life and really interesting stuff. Like, for example, he even has a chapter about consciousness. Anyhow, I've read that book. I've listened to it several times. And I sometimes do use that book also to put myself back to sleep when I have a very early morning wake up. And I think that the key thing is just like, you want to be familiar with whatever it is, so that you're not uptight about like, oh, I don't want to miss it. You want to be like, okay, I've heard this before. Oh, this is so interesting. This is his theory about how, language or life might have evolved in the first place. It's really, really interesting stuff. But yeah, and can help you go back to sleep too.
Yeah, I have heard Sean Carroll's debate on certain topic. So I have heard him, Sean Carroll. And Andy Weir, Martian, I watched the movie, but I couldn't read the novel yet. I have his, have you read his story, The Egg by Andy Weir?
I have not. I read his most recent novel, which
Okay.
I think wasn't as good as The Martian. And if you like the movie The Martian, you should really read the book.
Yes.
Because
Oh,
if you think about the structure of The Martian, it's kind of like the Odyssey. So he like faces one challenge after another challenge after another challenge as he's struggling to make it home. And in the movie, just to make it a good movie, they had to leave out like 7/8 of the challenges. And there are some fantastic ones that are in the book. And also in the book, there's a lot more of the science. Like he'll actually say aloud how he has to think about like, oh, if I do this, I'll run out of carbon dioxide because I'm using, I'll run out of oxygen and I'll become poisoned by carbon dioxide because I'm using up my oxygen at this level. And, my carbon dioxide's accumulating at this level and my filter can only absorb so much. And, he really takes you through the math in the book and it's fantastic. I think he did a real service to science because he really showed, I think, general readers how scientific thinking can be so useful to survival. So good for Andy Weir. He's really good.
and you mentioned Isaac Asimov. He's one of my favorite authors. I couldn't finish the entire Foundation series, but I have read, I think, 3 or 4 initial parts of that Foundation series. I may take up this one again. So it's really, really philosophically and scientifically amazing.
It is really fantastic, and Professor Jamshed, I really want to encourage you to read through to the end because Second Foundation is really fantastic. Like the way that it ends is really pretty great. So I totally encourage you and all your students to read that. And also, if you haven't read Dune is incredible. The book Dune is unbelievable. And I can't really, I've read it. I speak Spanish and I've read it in Spanish too, because I like it so much, as a way of improving my Spanish. So yeah, Dune is one of the greatest novels of all time and a big favorite of mine. So I totally recommend it.
Okay, so on this forum, I'm promising you that I will finish Isaac Asimov Foundation. But Dune, I will look into it. I will just mark it in my book list. So,
and Professor Jamshed, send me an email when you finished Second Foundation, so we can correspond about that.
Okay, so right on this track, how do you read fiction? What I mean is, do you start one book and go till the end, or you start multiple books?
Yeah, so I tend to actually listen a lot more than I read. And I am a big bike rider. And so often I'll be listening to a book while I'm bicycling. That's one of my main forms of exercise. And so I think that because I'm a listener, I tend to do generally one book at a time. Like I'm generally not reading multiple works at the same time. And I think that just suits my thinking style.
Oh, okay. So actually my way is I start multiple books at a time. Right now, I believe I have started 14 or 15 books. So people have difficulty in following up, but somehow I don't have this problem. Once I listen to part of a book or read one book, so I read books on mobile phone, physical hard copy, on laptop, and I listen to book through YouTube. I have several books downloaded and Audible. So I can keep track of the stuff. So yeah, your way is rather simpler, and I think you can go in deeper details as compared to my way of thinking about it. Okay, so we have a question from Shayan. Shayan is a second year student, Form D students from Salim Habib University. His question, I'm going to read it. In terms of socializing, there are people that give criticism to the idea of something new. How do you overcome the negativity and demotivation? So I believe you have partly addressed this question. So if you would like to add something to it, so you can add to it. So you can start with when the first time you came up with the idea of bringing a guitar and starting music video. So you can talk about that a little.
Yeah, it's funny. The first time I did it, I was in a room of misbehaving students, and I brought out my guitar. And I think they were just so astounded by the idea that their teacher was going to do that in class that they joined me with a lot of enthusiasm. And that first year, I had such great experiences. I mean, I was a young teacher. I was 27 years old. And my students were younger than me, but they were 16. There wasn't that much of an age gap, but still they were able to join along in this adventure of a teacher who was bringing out his guitar and was singing with them. And I think I've always had the experience of kids, like when I bring my guitar out, they'll be like, "Really? Is he going to sing a song to us?" And they're going to like cringe with embarrassment. But once we start, kids tend to join in with really good energy. But I'll tell you a funny story about the other side of that. So I started my career at this school for students who were having trouble. And then I wanted to move on to teach in a regular school. And also the first school I taught at was in a very rural part of the state that I was living. And I wanted to live more in the city. So I was interviewing for jobs. And, here I was, young, 27, 28-year-old teacher. And I would bring my guitar to the job interviews. And I would, I'd say, well, listen, I want to let you know that I'm a really innovative young teacher and I'm really going to motivate your students. And I brought my guitar because I want to show you what I'm going to do. And I would take out my guitar in the interview and I would say, this is what I'm going to do. And they would all really like that, but I didn't get the job. And that happened the first time, it happened a second time, and it happened a third time. And, I was talking to my mother about that. And my mom said to me, "Glenn, listen, just do this as an experiment. Next time you have a job interview, leave the guitar home and see what happens, and just see what happens." And I did leave the guitar home and I got the job. And once I had the job, I was able to bring my guitar out and I was able to start singing to my students. So I think the lesson I learned was that, when you're a teacher, you have a lot of control and you have a lot of authority and you're a decision maker. And that's when, that's maybe when you need to be a little careful about other people's negativity and other people's judgment. But, once it's your show, and, when you're the teacher, it's your show, then you can feel free to do whatever you want. So, that's been my experience with negativity and demotivation. It hasn't been a big problem. And I also think, again, when you bring really good energy to a situation, it doesn't always happen, but I think a lot of times people will respond and people will give you a chance. So it is a risk. It's definitely a little bit of a risk, but I've never had a bad experience with it.
Okay, so extrapolating from your answer, what is your experience? Is it the students who are more open to new ideas as compared to the administration or people at the administrative side? So how do you view this? So students are much more open to new ideas. So is this what we can get from your answer?
Well, are students more open to new ideas? I think, Professor Jamshed, you seem like you have great energy and you seem like you're probably a wonderful instructor. not every teacher has great energy, and a lot of teachers just see their job as like delivering information, and it's the student's job to learn it. So I think that when you come before your students with enthusiasm, with love for your subject area, but also not only that, just sort of love for your students too, like we're going to be on this great journey together, and in this journey, we're both going to have our minds really grow and our understanding grow. And I love doing this, and I'm going to be taking you on this journey with me. I think students tend to be pretty open to that. Now, at the same time, I've had tough teaching assignments with learners who are more challenged. And, there are more issues related to classroom management and things like that. So, I've experienced that just like every other teacher has experienced. And I really believe in the power of teachers to motivate their students. But I also know that power is not infinite. And there are things that are going on in a student's life that are sometimes insurmountable for a teacher to get to the other side of. So I think like with a lot of things, you bring your good energy, you hope that people go along with you, and you understand that sometimes people won't be receptive. And then, tomorrow's another day.
Excellent. So if I am correct, so you gave us a lot of books to read, our book club members. So one was Make It Stick. This is one. And then Richard Dawkins' books, Ancestor's Tale and Selfish Genes. I've read both of them. I think I've read 5 or 6 or something like that books. And there is another book that I can't even name it, because we live in an ultra conservative country. So I can't even name the book, one of the books by Richard Dawkins. So it will be a trouble over here. Yeah. So Julia Cameron's Artist's Way, and Andy Weir inside of fiction, Isaac Asimov's Foundation, and Dune. And you also talked about Big Picture by Sean Carroll, and you wanted us to check out a cappella science apart from the your own channels. So with this, I would want you to guide our fiction book club members how they can do what you do. What I mean by that is how they can create these music videos, or how they can create information, how they can create infotainment, how they can create information-laced presentations. So how can you, what will be your guiding principle for our book club members? If they want to do what you do, they want to entertain people, but they want to educate them as well. So what is your insight into human psychology, or whatever your experience is?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you have to find things that you're really passionate about. And, if you have a musical ability, or if you have some kind of skill or something like that, people are always interested in seeing some things like that. So that's it. You want to find stories that you're passionate about telling. And when I say stories, it doesn't mean to be a fiction story. So like, for example, one thing that I actually try and do is in most of my songs, I mean, there are some exceptions, like Mitosis is actually sort of a pretend lecture. But like some of the songs are actually like very imaginative. Like I went into a cell to get out of the rain, and there was the gatekeeper, the cell membrane. So it was like choosing a different angle on something that people generally think about. But I would say find something that you're really passionate about, like a story that you want to tell, work with it so that it becomes an engaging story. And, I've done that through using music and rhyme, but I think that anybody can do that just by thinking about like, what's interesting about this? If you think about, well, things that you're probably thinking about as pharmacy students. So like, for example, what's interesting about like receptors, and what could be like a story about that? So like, for example, the way that I've handled that is if you go to learn-biology.com, and if you look in my unit on cell communication, what I do is I try and make the story of receptors and cell communication into the story of like what happens during the fight or flight response, and how what'll happen is, you know, you'll be releasing norepinephrine or adrenaline, depending on, I don't know what you call it over there in Pakistan. We have different names for it here in the United States. And what that does is it goes into your bloodstream, and that reaches the cells of your liver. And then those receptors need to pick up the norepinephrine, and then it'll open, you know, it's a G-coupled protein receptor. And there's all this really exciting stuff that happens, so that ultimately what can happen? You can release glucose into your bloodstream so that you can, you know, run away or fight back and survive. And that's a really cool story. So I think that even if you're doing nonfiction, sort of think of the story behind what you're telling, and that is going to lead to a really good result. And then you want to find a medium that you want to do it with, and you know, you can do that with just writing it out, and that can be totally engaging. You know, Professor Jamshed said that he was actually doing a lot of science writing himself in a nonfiction way, so that might be really cool stuff to do. Or, you know, video is really great too, and the fantastic thing about video is that, you know, because of cell phones, you know, the quality of video on a cell phone is incredible now. And so like the barriers that I experienced when I was first, you know, shooting video, like I have to buy a camera and things like that, is complicated. But another really good thing that I'll just tell everybody is that green screen is a fantastic technology. And basically all you need to do is you need to get green paper or a green sheet in the background. And once you have green in the background, you can pretty much, using almost any video editing software, you can put almost anything in the background behind you. So that's a big part of my technique as a video maker. I use a lot of green screen technique, and that has enabled me to really do some innovative stuff. So just to find out about green screen video, and then you can do all these incredible things in your studio. You know, you could put yourself in front of the Eiffel Tower if you wanted, and you could explain, you know, receptors and talk about that. Just making something up. But anyhow, you know, just find something that you're interested in and find a way that you want to tell it, and you'll have a great time.
Good. Aisha, you wanted to say something?
Yes. Hello, Mr. David, Mr. W, sorry. I really wanted to appreciate your method of learning, your method of teaching. That has made learning so much easier and fun. I feel if other teachers would have adopted this method of teaching, it would have been so much easier for us to study and learn. That's all that I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, I'm very glad, and you know, I wish you nothing but success in your own studies, and I'm glad that my songs have been useful. That makes me really, really happy to hear.
Okay, so we have reached our 1 hour mark. So in today's conversation, we covered a lot of topics. We covered what made Mr. W write his songs, his thought processes, his background in music and poetry. And he described to us what is the value of art in science. The activity that we do in Fiction Book Club, it is just like that. We appreciate the art in the form of literature. And I believe it helps in our scientific understanding as well. And then Mr. W described some of his favorite works of non-fiction and fiction, and we have also noted down. And then, as you can see, his method of teaching, it crosses all the cultural boundaries and all the geographical boundaries. So it is a really innovative and interesting way. So I would like to thank Mr. W for his enlightening talk and discussion. And indeed, he has inspired me, and I believe all my students, to think outside the box and find innovative solutions to the challenges of our time. So before I conclude the meeting, Mr. W, would you like to add something, or would you like to introduce us to your new projects or anything you would like to say? And then I will end the meeting.
No, I really want to tell you how honored I am as a high school teacher to be brought into your community. I think it's great that you have a book club and you're trying to expand the way that you're thinking and explore new frontiers. That's a fantastic thing. And I want to tell you how much I've really enjoyed this time that we've spent together. You know, I do want to let everybody know that I do have a website, learn-biology.com. One thing that I actually am curious about is, you know, we price it for American learners, and that price might be difficult for people who live in other countries. And if you're interested in using my website and you find that the price is difficult, you can just send me an email. And here, I'll put my email in the chat. Just send me an email, and you know, anybody can use the website. I mean, if you can pay for it, that's fantastic. If you can't, just the idea for me that students in Pakistan are using my website is thrilling, would be absolutely thrilling. So check it out. It might be too elementary for you, but maybe you have a younger sibling or something like that who's at is at college or at the high school level, and it might be useful to them. But I want to let you know, just the idea that I'm getting to talk to people in Pakistan is really, really exciting for me. And I feel really honored by your having me on the show today.
Thank you so much. And I would advise students to first talk to me, and then we can manage this thing. But thank you so much. And now I am going to end the meeting for all. So it will abruptly disappear. So don't be surprised by that. Thank you so much, Mr. W. Thank you so much.
Be well. Thank you.